Okay, thank you all for joining today. My name is Nicole Jarvis. I am a Senior Manager of Programs at Cancer and Careers, and I will be your host for today's webinar. Before we begin, just a few housekeeping items related to accreditation. Today's webinar is accredited for CEUs by ANCC, NASW, the New York State Education Department State Board for Social Work, the California Board of Registered Nursing, and the Society for Human Resource Management. If you plan on receiving continuing education credit for this program from any of the following bodies, please proceed with the following steps. First, you must log in individually for today's sessions. Participants who listen in on someone else's line or computer will not receive credit. And second, you must complete and submit the evaluation and post-test, as well as receive a passing grade on the post-test. Following today's session, you'll receive an email with all of this information. That email will be sent at 5 p.m. Eastern Time, Thursday, March 11th, and certificates will be emailed within 4 to 6 weeks. Also, please note that the planners and presenters for this program have not disclosed any pertinent financial relationships or conflicts of interest, and that no commercial support was provided for this program. Thanks in part to direct support from Genentech, HSN, and QVC, Cancer and Careers is able to offer the 7th year of the Balancing Work and Cancer webinar series. This program was created in order to provide patients and survivors, as well as their care teams and employers, with concise, targeted information around the work-related issues that arise after a cancer diagnosis. Additionally, we would like to recognize Cancer and Careers year-round sponsors who support all of our core programming and also allow us to continue providing all of our resources and services free of charge. Now, many are aware of the pressure and stress of job hunting. Looking for a new job during or after cancer treatment can often feel overwhelming. We want to help you see that it's possible and manageable. Our goal here is to make sure that you are well prepared as you begin to apply for a job. Today, we'll focus on the tactics to make you successful and effective in your job search. In this session, you'll learn tips on creating an effective resume, how to ace an interview, including addressing questions about a gap on your resume, and more. We understand each of you may have your own questions as well, so we'll have time for those at the end of the hour. All questions that you want answered should be entered into the Q&A box, which is located either on the top or the bottom of your screen. Please do not ask questions for Julie in the chat box. Please direct them to the Q&A box. If you're joining us via the phone today, you can press *9, which will alert us of your question. Now, to take us through this topic, I'm thrilled to introduce Julie Jansen. Julie is a speaker, trainer, coach, and author who has helped thousands of professionals find success and satisfaction at work, as well as find work that is gratifying. She's written 2 books, but most important to us, Julie is one of the original coaches at CAC. She's been helping patients and survivors with their individual employment challenges for many years now. Following Julie's presentation, there will be time for you to ask questions, but for now, I will turn it over to Julie to get us started. Julie?
Thanks, Nicole. I appreciate it. So, as you're all painfully aware, we're a year, almost to the day, of living with COVID-19. But interestingly, other than virtual video interviews and hiring processes, not much else about job search has really changed. So, no matter, managing the psychological aspects of a job search can be difficult regardless of what's happening in the world. And of course, this coupled with your individual cancer experience makes it tougher. This presentation today will dig into how to create your job search plan and cover a lot of the tactical elements of looking for a job. And as Nicole mentioned, we will have time for Q&A. So let's first talk about some myths to dispel. Myth number 1, no one is hiring. Well, contrary to what you may believe, companies are hiring actively. Obviously, some sectors continue to be in tough shape, including travel and event planning and brick and mortar retail, leisure, hospitality. Yet there are many industries that are booming and have benefited from the pandemic. I will share more about this in a few moments. There's a recently released study that just came out, Monster's Future of Work 2021 Global Outlook Special Report, that found that 82% of employers plan to hire in 2021, including 37% who plan to fill positions that were left open after layoffs, and more than 1/3, 35%, that are hiring for new jobs. Most companies put job applicants through at least 3 to 4 interviews pre-COVID. Now you can continue to expect more interviews, primarily still virtual, of course. The biggest challenge that both applicants and employers have with virtual interviewing and recruiting is that it's harder to tell if culture and values align. Myth number 2, most open jobs are lower level. The media is quick to talk about all of the hiring that Instacart, Amazon, Walmart, and many similar companies have been doing. And while this is true, if you search for manager or director level jobs on Indeed or LinkedIn, you'll find upwards of 300,000 job openings on those levels. And even if 100,000, say, don't really exist because they just were left there as a posting, there would still be 200,000 mid-level and senior level positions open, not to mention the hidden job market. So the top industries that are actually hiring in 2021, and I recognize that some of these require in-person workers, are healthcare, finance, banking, and real estate. Technology, most technology companies are adding tons of new jobs. So, apologies, I'm trying to turn the slide. Okay. So, before you start, this is the same advice I've given job seekers before the pandemic, and I'm giving it to you now. I'm constantly surprised by how few people are not aware of their expenses beyond rent or a mortgage. There are always non-essential expenses that you can cut down or eliminate altogether, and that goes for all of us, of course. Taking care of yourself, especially if you're still receiving treatment and you're recovering from your cancer experience, is, as you're well aware, so crucial. Managing your stress, trying to exercise in any way you can, doing things you enjoy, rediscovering passions. A lot of us have done that during the last year, and even finding new hobbies. Consider a side gig. If you've got skills that you can offer others virtually, think about doing this to stay productive. And there's lots of websites and resources for finding these kinds of opportunities, or just marketing yourself to your friends and family and contacts. Hire a career coach or a professional resume writer. Or if you went to a college or university, contact your alumni association to see what assistance they might be able to give you. Boost your skills. Analyze job descriptions by listing the required skills and experience that they want, and compare those to your current knowledge and experience. And there's lots and lots of online courses that are free. Things like edX, Microsoft, Khan Academy, KHAN, and others. The next thing you want to do is think about researching the job market. Industries, again, that are hiring or expanding are manufacturing and food, consumer products, logistics, distribution, pharma, biotech, technology, data mining, online education and learning, sports betting, and gaming. According to Career Builder, and these are some of the jobs I mentioned earlier that have to be in person, so they may not be applicable for you, of course, given your experiences. But things like heavy and tractor trailer drivers, registered and critical care nurses, personal care aides, customer service reps, which can be done virtually, software and applications developers. I'm hearing lots of stories about people who are a little bit older who are going back to coding boot camp. Light truck or delivery service drivers, of course, you know that Amazon shifted their model dramatically toward that, and general and operations managers. Do research on Glassdoor or with people who actually work at a company you're interested in to find out how that company treats their employees, and incredibly significant to many of you, how are the companies handling return to work? The latest intel I've heard on that is July and moving forward, there will be lots of hybrid models for returning to work. So what does it take to actually succeed in a job search? Job search can be very overwhelming. And so I really like the idea of breaking it down into smaller steps. This slide talks about the things that are important to do in order sequentially. The first thing is really take a personal inventory of yourself. What's your experience? What are your achievements? What are your abilities? And really important, what are your interests? This is an important first step. And this is when, once you do that, update your resume and LinkedIn profile to the best of your ability. Learn how to present yourself virtually, to answer tough questions, and to stand out from other candidates. Do your research online and by talking to people about some of the things we just talked about, and prepare a marketing strategy. That sounds very fancy, but it's really just identifying who you'll reach out to, who are your target companies, and like just assign some quantified goals to that. And finally, build a network if you don't have one. It's never too late to start building a network. And I'll get into it in a little bit, but LinkedIn is by far the easiest place to do that. And we will get into more detail about all of these topics. So I do the resume reviews for Cancer and Career, and I'll encourage you, and I know Nicole mentioned it later, but I'll encourage you to submit your resume to that service. You'll get a comprehensive review from me about things that you have done well with your resume and some things that you could do to improve it. Know that someone, basically a human being, once it gets into human hands, they'll spend about 30 seconds really reading your resume. You want to really try to avoid too much content, really long paragraphs and sentences, big blocks of text. And the other thing is sometimes I see resumes that have no content on it at all, barely. And so that could be a mistake as well. Definitely talk, instead of in generalities, talk about achievements and accomplishments. And if you can quantify using percentages and numbers and things like that, the person who reduced turnover by 25% in 6 months is much more impressive than the person who merely reduced turnover. More about your resume. 2 pages for most professionals. 1 page is for a recent college grad. 3 pages is for someone who's on the C level, so someone who's running an area or function in a company. Definitely a must to have either a profile or a summary paragraph on the top of your resume. This is the section that a potential employer or someone will read to learn the most about you in a snapshot. And once they look at, the way they look at your resume is they'll look at your name, they'll look at your geographic location. And by the way, people are not putting addresses, full addresses on their resumes anymore because of privacy and identity theft. And many hiring professionals will tell you that when they're doing a first screen of a resume that's come through ATS, which we'll talk about, the summary is all they're going to read before they put it in the yes or no pile. And it's also the place that you can kind of give it a little personality by talking about a few of your personal traits that have benefited you professionally. So at a minimum, 80% of your content should be accomplishments, and you must have keywords that many companies use when they use ATS software to scan and put you in the yes or no screening pile. So this is a sample profile. It's a marketing person. They've done various things in marketing, social media strategy, internal communications, trade shows will come back. Demonstrated agility at managing projects and influencing stakeholders. It's a nice, concise summary and just merely an example. And then these are sample keywords still for the marketing professional. So the marketing professional, these are maybe a few too many, but there's a lot of content on the Cancer and Careers site that goes into further detail about sample keywords, as you can see in this slide, for different functional areas. Also, try to avoid using trite or cliche phrases that, you know, everyone's supposed to be an effective communicator. So, you know, try to think of a more creative way to say it. So many of you have gaps because you left your work situation perhaps for treatment. And so it's really a great idea to put volunteer and community service on your resume. Not personal information. We don't really list hobbies unless it's something highly unusual. And then any information about your remote experience. I mean, we pretty much all have remote experience, but it's still a nice add-on. And then I really like adding a headline if it's specific and focused. And typically it just tends to be almost the same title of the job that you're looking for, and yet another place for ATS to scan. It's okay. I get this question a lot about dates. If you're older, you can find out how old someone is regardless by Googling them. But if it makes you uncomfortable, don't put the dates. And then just make sure you're using fonts that are very readable. If you're looking at the slides, you can see the fonts that I tend to recommend. And you want some white space. So how do you develop accomplishments? Well, there's a lot of formulas that resume writers use and people who train people in interviewing. It's always kind of looking at what was the problem? What was the situation that needed changing? What was the need? What didn't exist? And then what did you do about it? And then, after that, it's sort of like, this is really more for you. What was the barrier or obstacle that you overcame? Because and that's something that you can talk about in interviews too, which is nice. And what results did you produce? Trying to quantify, as I mentioned earlier, as much as you possibly can with numbers. Cover letters, yes, yes, yes. If you have an opportunity to write a cover letter, please write a cover letter. I've decided in my years of experience in helping clients with all this stuff, that cover letters are akin to going to the dentist. People are just put themselves through pain writing a cover letter. And candidly, it just needs to be brief. It's another opportunity to be scanned. It's always scanned with your application and your resume. You just want to be thoughtful. You're sometimes going to just put a cover letter in an email. Just be thoughtful about what your subject line is. The best subject line is one where you can reference someone who referred you. Obviously, that's not often the case. You always want to try to mention something about the company in your cover letter, so it doesn't look like you just cut and paste and used a template cover letter, which of course we do. When I write cover letters for clients, I cut and paste a little bit, and then I look at the actual job posting and use some of the keywords that they use in the cover letter. Use bullets versus big long paragraphs, and of course proofread your letter. And if you can follow up, if you can possibly find someone at the company, not always easy, I recognize, but try to do that as well. So job aggregate boards, a smaller percentage of people, job seekers, find jobs through these boards. It's a big reason is that companies get a huge number of online applications for jobs. And so because they get so many, their screening, ends up being narrowed down to 8 or 10, maybe a few more. And so I think really LinkedIn is probably the most common way for recruiters to find you. But job aggregate boards are great for content. They're great for understanding the kinds of job titles that companies hire. They're great for articles, surveys, researching. And so I'm not saying avoid these, but definitely just put them in the mix, but don't rely completely just on job aggregate boards. Social media can seem quite overwhelming. A lot of people have an Insta account, and that's great, but that's not necessarily really for business unless you're a creative professional. You don't need to tweet if you don't want to. If you want, if you're interested in writing a blog, I think that's a creative outlet, and your blog posts can be, five words if you want. I would say use Facebook pretty carefully, and overall, just manage your digital reputation. It's really important. Sign up for Google Alerts on yourself, Google yourself regularly, try to update all your profiles regularly to kind of move you ahead. It's hard to keep up at all with Google algorithms. Right now, I will say every single employer is using social media to screen candidates. we're still in the pandemic. Obviously, there's an end in sight, but using social media prudently is even more important right now. And checking, going through, you know, we don't remember what's on our social media. We're just adding things and posting. And so just kind of dedicate yourself to going back and looking at all of your social media, whatever it is, and just go through it and check. Be prepared to, you know, all of you are different about how you address your cancer diagnosis, your financial situation. These are just some things to be aware of. Volunteering in the cancer community. Some people get worried that, oh, if they see that I'm volunteering, they'll think that I've had cancer. What would those connections potentially mean? And is that even significant to you? What kind of information could be revealed in a background or credit check? Not every company does those. There's just certain industries that do and certain companies that believe in it. And any social media posts or blogs about your cancer diagnosis. So LinkedIn, I'm surprised. I'm preparing the LinkedIn webinar that I'm doing for this series for Cancer and Careers that's coming up, I think it's in May. And LinkedIn has changed a lot over time, and it changed a lot just last year. There's about 722 million people on LinkedIn right now. 670 something million people are active on LinkedIn. There's something like 70% of people that use LinkedIn do not live in the United States. But LinkedIn is, whether you like it or not, it's the most widely used business-oriented social network in the world. It's been a lifesaver for people and companies during the pandemic. And so you don't have to jump both feet in on LinkedIn. I just really feel strongly that it's an important platform for you to use, even if it's just a little bit superficially. The relationships are in forms of connections. You really just want to pay attention to first connections. I connect directly with Nicole Jarvis. She accepts my invitation. She's a first degree connection. Nicole has a connection. That'll be my second degree connection. And it hasn't been intended as a replacement for video networking or someday face-to-face networking again, but it is instrumental to networking. And once you get a little comfortable with it, it makes it easy to keep up with people and look at what they're doing and send them a quick little message and like their posts and ask connections how they can help you and how you can help them. Your professional headline is really important. The about section is the same or similar to the summary on your resume. A photo is absolutely a must. It doesn't need to be a professional headshot. As you can see, if you're looking at this slide, it barely, really, it's just your head. So the skills and endorsement section is about keywords. They give you room for 50. And you just want to put the keywords in there that are the ones that are most widely used for the jobs that you're actually applying for. You do absolutely want to ask for recommendations from people, so you have recent and relevant recommendations. If you're up to post updates, if you don't want to, you don't have to, just like other people's posts. And you can join, there's I don't even know how many thousands and thousands of LinkedIn groups. Join them selectively, just join a couple and get involved with them. There are a lot of people that have similar professions and interests as you. And then also you're assigned automatically a LinkedIn public profile URL. And I'm still a little surprised by how few people customize theirs to just their name. And it's an easy fix. You just get rid of all the letters and numbers, and usually you can have your name or like Julie Jansen 1 or something like that. Well, you have to be able to be comfortable with introducing yourself. It's something that makes all of us nervous. You really just want to be succinct. I mean, you're talking about like, I don't know, I guess we should change this from elevator because I happen to live in a building that has elevators. but generally I haven't been in another elevator in a long time. So it's like 45 minutes to 2 minutes. I'm sorry, 45 seconds to 2 minutes, not 45 minutes. And while you have, sort of your unique way of talking about you and your job or your business, it doesn't mean you can't be interesting as well. So no, I'm a senior call center manager. I manage a group of people who make customers happy. That's good enough, and it is very clear about what you do. And then just project confidence, even if you fake it till you make it, as they say, as far as confidence. And then if you can, use self-effacing humor. And it's always a good idea to practice your introduction with someone else who's not judgmental. Networking. I've been talking about networking for years. Companies have hired me to help their employees with it. It's a crucial part of any goal that you want to achieve, especially job search. It's still something that I would say easily 60 to 70% of people are highly uncomfortable doing. But here's the stats. It's probably higher than 85% of all jobs are found through networking. 80% are what are called, what I referenced earlier, the hidden job market. The hidden job market is exactly what it sounds like. Jobs aren't posted. They're sort of a glimmer in an employer's eye. Like, if we could find this kind of person, we would hire them. And so that's where targeting companies is a really good idea, and just following companies that you're interested in. I encourage my clients to do that all the time. They always say to me, well, they don't have a job opening for what I do, but they may someday, or if you get to know a few people, they may decide to create something. And most people have at least 250 contacts. I mean, the stats are that 250 people know another 250 people. And if you do the math, it's like 62,500 people. 30% of jobs are definitely created through someone So there are benefits to social distancing, and I think we want to continue this forward in the next months or so as we start to go back to more normalcy. Definitely a captive audience that we've had. So I hope that if you haven't been leveraging that for messaging, emailing, video, and I beg people to talk to me on the phone, please, I don't want an 8th video call, please, can we use the phone? And some people are really relieved by it, but everyone has been affected by COVID and needs help with something. And that's never going to change, even when we move out of the pandemic. Networking is not intended to be event driven, only doing it when you need something. But if you can try to just embed it in your everyday existence and be a helpful person, reciprocity, as I always say, is so crucial and key to effective networking. If you're focusing on the other person first, before you focus on what you need, you'll feel more comfortable instantly. Network with everyone, because you don't know who can help whom, and try to be really specific about what you need. It's really confusing to someone, especially if they don't necessarily understand or know what your skills or experience is, or the specific type of job you're looking for, that you are very specific about what, if I said to you, if you know anyone who needs a resume, well, you might assume everybody needs resumes. But if I say, if you know anybody who's been in a job for 5 years or longer, then they probably haven't updated their resume, which, by the way, unfortunately is a sad and true statistic. Then that's going to be someone that could be a referral for me, and then use etiquette, please, thank you. It's silly to say, but people have varying levels of competence in that area, I would say. It's a habit. Definitely, you can't remember everything. You can, if you've got a lot of connections on LinkedIn, you can download those. So there is a function on LinkedIn that enables you to do that. And I do recommend to people that they do that. I don't think Microsoft is going to be getting rid of LinkedIn anytime soon, but it would be nice if you felt like you had that record somewhere. And you're just not going to have chemistry with everyone. It's okay if you don't connect or click with someone and they feel the same way about you. You just don't want to take it personally. They don't know you well enough and you don't know them well enough to think that it's personal. Unless you do something offensive like bullet number 1 where you don't have appropriate etiquette. So back to researching an employer, though we talked about this a few times. I just feel like people might not spend enough time doing this. It's really pretty easy to find out all this stuff, especially as it's pertinent to your specific situation with cancer. You know, what kind of, I mean, most companies, if they didn't have an EAP, they definitely put it in place. You know, if they've had issues with discrimination, they've definitely had to take a hard look. I mean, this last year has been a real learning for employers as well as it has for employees, but there's lots of places that you can research companies, and don't just rely on one source or one person who was upset on Glassdoor. So regarding online applications, they're a bear. They're a bear for people. They're onerous. They take a lot of time. It's really good to just plug in. It's all about the keywords. It's all about a cover letter. It's all about, like, you know, downloading that sample application first and taking a look at it and reviewing it. And by all means, do not use autofill to apply for positions because the formatting can get crazy. And it's really a good idea, even with LinkedIn, cut and paste content instead of physically typing it in. Don't leave sections incomplete, even if you feel as if the information is redundant, unless you think it's discriminatory, of course. And then follow the company's instructions pretty carefully and proofread everything. Because remember, and it's likely there's an online application, they're using ATS, and ATS is using algorithms. So you have to kind of pay attention to the instructions. Okay, so when it comes to interviewing, I mean, interviewing is a robust topic. I still feel like people are not as comfortable with video interviews just because people have really only been doing it for about a year. While companies have certainly figured out a lot about it, and they had no choice. I talked to someone today. She was the first virtual hire, a financial services company that she works for, that her company made. And since then, in the last year, they've made 35 virtual hires, and they're growing exponentially. They happen to be like an investment management firm or something. She said, so we've got it down. We've got it nailed now. The do's and don'ts for interviewing, even though it's video, haven't really changed, and I think if you're doing any informational interviews, you want those to be video as well. And the more comfortable you get with the platform, you know, the more effectively you'll come across. This sounds silly, but even yesterday, one of my clients had a technology issue, and we spent, you know, 12 minutes trying to figure it out. It happens. There's just too much involved. The visual clutter behind you, I still see some really weird things behind people that I don't comment unless they're asking my advice, but lots of light, or, you know, gigantic windows or strange posters. So you just want to be cognizant of that. And I know some people have, I empathize space issues, you know, where you're kind of, I remember talking to this guy, he had to work from his closet because he had a small apartment in New York City. You know, it was pretty tough. So your laptop or your device there, you know, you're really only seeing like below your shoulders to the middle of your upper arms. You try to make eye contact. Your camera, unfortunately, is usually on the top of your computer, so it makes it look like you're looking down. If you've got notes, just place them adjacent to your computer. You know, you only have to put something nice on top, but, you know, you've heard all the horror stories of no bottoms or weird bottoms or things like that. You still, in an interview, want to use the person's name. I'm still surprised when I talk to people how they don't use my name ever. Like, they don't say, hey, Julie, you know, ever. And I think you might do that in person, but it just seems like an odd thing to me. If you have a personality, show it. It's okay. I don't think we look too overly animated on video. I think Zoom in particular has done a pretty good job of that. But you definitely want to be demonstrating energy. And then when it comes to the interview, you're prepping just like you would. You're researching the company, as we've mentioned several times. You've looked at everybody on LinkedIn. The tough questions, I'm doing a panel next Tuesday for a group in Florida, actually. And they asked, what's the toughest question? And I think that's one of my questions that I have to answer. And I'm like, I'm going to say it's probably tell me about yourself, because people don't know how to answer that succinctly. Or it might be this question that companies love to ask, which is, tell me about your biggest failure. And, you know, we'd all like to say, well, I've never failed. And we might not see it as failure, but they want to kind of see not so much what it was, but how you handled whatever the tricky situation was. So, and the good news is when you're still doing virtual interviews, you can have the job description right next to you. You can highlight it. You can write notes. You definitely want to give examples using stories about yourself rather than saying, I'm a great team player. All my employers have said that. You would instead say something like, I'm a good team player. And a recent example was, I was asked to run this lead this ad hoc team without any authority. And I was really able to rally a couple departments that never liked working together. And we completed the project, and I was really excited about it, you know. So that was kind of loose, but that gives you the idea of just adding a little color, and it's a real example that the person can imagine when they're hearing you describe it. Gaps, you know, I'm going to be a little controversial and say gaps really don't matter that much anymore. They didn't matter a lot early last year as much. You just, and I recognize, look, there's going to be someone on this webinar who is going to say, well, no, Julie, you're wrong because I have a 16-year gap. Well, you have a 16-year gap for whatever reason, whatever your reason is. Think about your response, and this really is called the swivel. It was coined by Cancer and Careers. I don't take credit for it, but it's really like, talk about briefly, if you're even asked about your gap, what have you been doing? Might be the most common question since 2018. If you're even asked about it, which in many cases you may not be, then you have a quick, brief answer, and you do what's called the swivel and swivel back to what's positive about what you can bring to the company if they hire you in this particular job. And this is a nice example, or a couple examples on this slide. So sometimes you get these really weird questions. Don't get flustered. It's easy to get flustered, but just try to respond to the question and answer it to the best of your ability, unless, of course, it's a discriminatory question. Try to be assertive, and instead of saying, well, I think what I did was, instead say, well, the way that I approached it is, you want to ask smart, thoughtful questions just as much as you want to have smart and thoughtful responses to questions, because it'll make the whole interview fall flat if at the end the interviewer says, well, Nicole, do you have any questions? And Nicole goes, no, I think you've answered them all. Or Nicole asks some sort of superficial question. You know, it's better to have prepared 5 or 6 really thoughtful questions, things about the business problems or obstacles, or your predecessor, or the progression of the position, or the content of the job, or those kinds of things. And try, by all means, to avoid discussion about salary and compensation for as long as you can. We'll talk about that in a few moments. Try to close the deal, so to speak. I know you're not all salespeople. It is a selling opportunity to be in an interview. So I like something like this. Is there anything that we've talked about that would help you decide to bring me back for another interview? And sometimes the interviewer will be honest and say, well, we haven't talked about this, or now that you ask, and sometimes they won't, but it's worth a try for sure. So negotiating. The ideal time to negotiate is when you've got an offer, when it's on the table. They want you. They don't want to keep interviewing. They've decided you're the person. So do not, I had a client talk to me about this in a coaching session last week. She said, oh, Julie, I was very like flat-footed because they asked me what salary I was looking for. And this was a person who had about 3 years of experience. And then she wanted to move from a certain kind of job to another kind of job that she had never done before. And she didn't think to do salary research. So she had no, and she was in a very low paying industry, trying to get into something that paid, was an industry that paid a little bit better. And she was like, I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to say. And fortunately, the interviewer was like, well, this is what we're thinking our range is. And that doesn't always happen. So you definitely want to have information ahead of time about salary ranges. The laws are lightening up. Companies are lightening up about being secretive about salaries and compensation, but it's still not always possible to find out. But you can get ranges, and there's lots of sites, salary.com, PayScale, Indeed, and even on LinkedIn, where you can get that information. And so if they ask you, well, what do you want to earn? Again, you're trying to avoid answering that. So you want to talk about, you think, you're sure they'll be fair and equitable. Can you tell me what your range is? Or my research shows that the range is this and this. Is that accurate? And then be quiet. Like the less said, the better about this. And this always confuses people. So I'll try to say it as well as I can. If you're giving a salary range, like you say, I got to say something, let me give them a range. The top end of the range that you give should be your starting point. So in other words, you want to keep the range wide. Never say yes or no until you're ready. You want to make sure, sometimes people feel pressure. I have to decide. And it is true in today's market, it's an employer's market right now. And so in today's market, it's kind of, you feel pressure to say, I have to say yes, I have to say yes. But if you don't know everything about the benefits or, the way, the approach to work or where you would work or all those things, you have every right to ask those questions, and also to ask for it in writing. All they have to do is email something to you. And of course you want to be appreciative before you negotiate. I'm really excited. If you can do negotiation on video, all the better, because then they're going to be reminded of why they wanted to hire you. And again, remember, think package, not just salary. There's always, no matter what the job is, there's always more to compensation than just a salary. Okay. Back to you, Nicole.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Julie. I know that was a lot of information for everyone to process, but this is a really great foundation for you all to start. Before we head into the Q&A, here are a few of Cancer and Careers. Sorry, it looks like we went one forward. Let me just try to get that back. Okay, well, we'll just cover. So these are just a couple of the job search resources that are offered through Cancer and Careers. As you know, and as Julie had mentioned, we have a resume review service. This is a service that is free of charge. Julie is the one who does the reviews, so it can be a helpful addition to today's webinar. We also have an online career coaching center, and we also have a number of webinars coming up, and we do offer free publications for order or download, including our job search toolkit, which is a really helpful guide throughout the job search process and the many elements that it includes. And additionally, we do have a number of free events coming up throughout the year. As I mentioned, a number of webinars left in the year, including 3 more with Julie over the next few months. Resumes 101, building an effective LinkedIn profile, which Julie talked about a little bit today, but that'll be a deeper dive into really setting up a successful profile online. We also have our Midwest Conference on Work and Cancer coming up at the end of this month, March 26th. As with everything we're doing these days, this will be virtual, so I would definitely encourage you, if you're available, to join us. And we also have our virtual national conference, which is taking place this June. If you have any questions, you can certainly give us a shout. Here's my email address. And I'm just going to leave up the CEU requirements while we move on to the question and answer. So let me just very quickly get those questions. I know that we had a few come in, and just as a reminder, if you have any questions, please shoot them over to the Q&A box. If you are on the phone, you can certainly go ahead and press *9. Okay, but we do have a number in the chat box. So Julie, if you're ready, I'm going to get started on those, okay? This one is from Marcy. She asks, do you always recommend a chronological resume, or is a functional resume also appropriate? And does it depend on any other factors?
Yeah, it's actually now a rarity that a functional resume is a good idea. And part of the reason is that it does raise red flags. You have the opportunity to put your functional expertise in a summary and in bulleted keywords. And so most of the time I don't recommend it, but if you do choose to use that kind of format, I would say the functional piece, you would only want to be no more than half of the first page until you get into work experience. In other words, you want people to be able to immediately see your work experience on page 1.
Great. This next question, and from what I'm seeing, there are a couple about the resume gaps in general in the chat box, but this first one is I don't want to go back to what I was doing. I was pretty senior. In fact, I'd like a lower level part-time job if possible. I think my resume is getting discarded because companies think that I'm overqualified for the job that I'm applying for. I've also been out of the job market for about 8 years, raising kids and then cancer treatment. How do you handle looking overqualified and then a pretty significant job gap?
Yeah, so now what's really a good idea is to just be obvious about the fact that you're looking for whatever kind of job you're looking for. So you want to say something in your summary that you had a career as this and you're now focused on doing this part-time. You want to say that in your headline, and even on LinkedIn, you would, since you had a gap, you would put the position that you're looking for in the job title for current, and then put that you're seeking a position. You know, it's just putting it out there, maybe minimizing the executive sounding words that are on your, and languages that are on your resume. And I definitely would recommend that you send it through the resume review service and just make a note that that's what you're trying to do, and I can give you really customized advice on that.
Great. We're getting a lot of questions, so I'm glad we have a good amount of time. This next question is from Donna. I took a lower level part-time job to help me work through cognitive issues. I've been doing it for a year and need to start looking for higher level work and pay. Do I include this on my resume?
So I think that's really your call. Like, are you comfortable eliminating a year experience of work experience? Or are you more comfortable just, saying that you had a gap? My gut is that I would put it on there and just find a way to embellish it a bit. And I don't mean lie, but, beef it up, the description a bit. And just be prepared to talk about it in an interview, that you just kind of needed to take a step back for a year and you're really looking forward to jumping back into your former career.
Yeah, and I would say that this is definitely a opportunity to use the swivel. It almost works pretty well with the example that we had on the slide there.
Yeah.
There's another question from Crystal. I'm currently 1 year from my surgery. 2 days after returning to work from surgery, I was terminated. Then the COVID shutdown happened. I didn't seek employment afterwards. I was more focused on recovering. I'm ready to start my job search. So how should I respond in an interview for this type of employment gap?
So you were laid off. right, you know, just as COVID hit, period.
Okay.
That's it. You don't need, like, we always feel like we have to explain so much. It's nobody's business, and you just want a succinct response that you practice and you feel comfortable, so you don't feel like you're not telling the truth. And you were laid off, you were. So that's it. If they say why, you would want to be prepared for that reason. And there's no harm in saying a reorganization or a shift in priorities, or, you know, or COVID, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Someone else asked, what advice do you have for someone approaching a career change, both role and industry, with a year-plus gap on their resume? Even before cancer, I was trying to make this change for my health when the pandemic hit.
Yeah, well, some people take 2 years, 3 years, 4 years to make a career change. And it's just that you're still trying to make that career change. As long as you're being realistic about the career change. So sometimes people aren't realistic, and I don't know what that career change is. But I think it's just have everything in your toolbox ready to go, and keep networking, because when you're making a career change, networking is going to be the most impactful way that you will be able to do that, by meeting people in your new industry of choice.
Sure. Lisa asks, I believe you said hold off on a salary discussion for as long as possible. What's the rationale behind that? If the salary is too low, isn't it a waste of time going through that process?
Because there's always room for negotiation. You know, I know there are, for example, nonprofits that have said, look, I can only pay between this and this, but then they have an obligation to share that with candidates, instead of making the candidate offer something and then telling them, well, we can't pay that, you know? So I think it's just a matter of giving yourself an opportunity to negotiate more. And in most cases, there is wiggle room for negotiation. So if the earlier on you throw out a number, that number is stamped on your forehead, no matter what. You can't go, oh no, I told you XX, now I've changed it to XXX. You know, it just isn't good for your credibility.
Yeah, it certainly puts you into a corner that would be
Yes.
certainly hard to back out of. This question is from Lisa. Typically, academics have far longer CVs than what you suggest, but how do you deal with this if you're moving from a teaching position to a business experience for which these skills are going to be valuable?
So I will say addendum. Addendums are great I certainly do medical and academic and science CVs and resumes quite a bit as well. And even those, even if you're accustomed to long CVs and resumes in your industry, nobody is going to pay attention to a 4-page resume or a 5-page resume. So if it needs to be 2.5 to 3 pages, then so be it, depending on your level, that's okay. And then just put the rest on an addendum.
Okay, so that's just an additional page.
It's an additional document that could be a couple pages also, you know, that you either are going to send with your resume, or say, I have this, this, and this, my publications, my speaking, you know, my board experience or whatever, on an addendum. Would you like to see that as well? If you're dealing with a human being, but I wouldn't send it if you're making an online application.
Okay. This question comes from Deborah. I've been with the same company for 23 years. How far back should I list my job experiences? Are they even relevant anymore at this point?
I mean, typically the rule of thumb is like 15 to 20 years that you put on your resume. But since you've been there 23 years, Deborah, I would say you're certainly going to have that job on there. Do you want the person to think that that's the only company you've worked for? Is that relevant? Does it matter? You kind of have to make an informed decision about that. You know, sometimes I'll hear someone say, well, my first job was at this amazing company, and I want them to see that I worked at that amazing company, you know, and then so just put it, but just put very little content. But do not avoid putting years. Because I think that raises a red flag. I've seen people put like earlier experience and not put the years and just say additional experience or something. And that's even more just red flaggish than putting dates, years.
Okay. That's good to know. Here's an additional question. I'm looking to secure a new position that carries a different job's description, but the same job title as my current position. How should I address this or prepare my resume to meet the job requirements?
Oh, that's interesting. I'm not sure how that works, but I would say then what you want to do is focus on the keywords. So some companies do have like a different vernacular, different language. And so if the content of the job, I'm not sure if the content of the job is the same or not, but I'm guessing there's some similarities. So I think I would take the lead of the job posting that you're looking at and use their language more in your bulleted keywords section and in your summary.
See what kind of transfers over, even though the
Yeah.
job description has changed. Okay. This question is from Jackie. Is it better to own your cancer survivorship as part of your brand, for example, including it as part of your personal summary on LinkedIn, or does that make people uncomfortable and should be avoided?
It's a personal preference. My professional advice is not to do that, because people don't put, and I know it's not the same, but I had diabetes, or I have multiple sclerosis, or I have, I had 5 miscarriages, or, I just think it doesn't put you on a level playing field. But if you get into an interview process and you want to do that, then that's your privilege. Absolutely. But not on social media necessarily, or certainly not on your resume.
Right. I think it goes back to the conversation about salary negotiations. And once you say something, it's out there. And so if you decide that somewhere else might not be look as kindly towards it or take it as a positive, it might hinder your opportunities a little bit. We also, Jack, we do have a number of webinars and resources on our website regarding disclosure, and particularly in the online space. So I would definitely recommend just taking a look at that, just to see if that could maybe guide your decision making a little bit more. Again, it is a personal decision. So, though Julie doesn't recommend it, it's going to be at the end of the day your decision. But these resources can help you just make a little bit more of an informed decision about it.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we have time for just another 1 or 2 questions. Nigel asks, is there a gap that employers in general would view as too long? I understand the swivel approach during an interview to explain your gap, but what if the challenge is for someone to reach the interview stage if my gap is too long? Or is it?
There isn't certainly any rule of thumb of a gap that I know of that's too long. And I do think that when you start getting into like 10 plus years, you're going to have to be very equipped to address it, even on your resume, perhaps, certainly in a cover letter, and certainly in any interviewing interaction or whatever, but we all have things happen to us. We live life, life is not, smooth sailing. So it's just be prepared. That's my best advice, is be prepared to address it. And don't feel guilty, don't feel uncomfortable. It's a reality that you can't change. And so just be able to handle it. That's all.
Mm-hmm. All right, we have one more question. I got a job in caregiving and have worked as an executive legal secretary in the legal field for 25 plus years. I feel I needed a part-time to full-time job helping others. And since I have additional surgeries delayed, which due to COVID, it could be a little bit more flexible. Do you have any advice on this decision?
So I'm not sure. I don't know if you've already become a caregiver. And so I'm giving you feedback on your decision, but I mean, I think it's great. I think it's wonderful. I think it's wonderful that you're helping people, and that was your choice and you did it for a reason. So I actually applaud you. And if you decide to go back into the legal field as a legal secretary again, you just say, I took a break. I worked as a part-time caregiver. As you can see, I have XX years of experience, and this is what I can do. And I'm here and I'm excited. So, just kind of take that approach.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's certainly great that you were able to find something that fulfills a number of your, passions and needs in terms of
Yeah.
wanting to help people while also working well with what your personal needs are. So I think it was a good decision if that's what you're asking.
Here, here.
All right, well, we are just at the top of the hour, so I do want to wrap this up. That was a really great Q&A session, I have to say. It was a really robust amount of questions, so thank you, Julie. I hope that you guys all found this job search webinar valuable. As I mentioned, we really do appreciate your feedback, so if you wouldn't mind filling out the evaluation that we are going to be sending out tomorrow by 5 p.m. It really helps us to develop this program, not only to meet your needs, but to also making sure that we have the funding in order to keep doing these kinds of calls. I know we had a ton of questions, so if we were unable to get to you during this call, please feel free to email us your question at cancerandcareers@cew.org, and we will definitely get those questions answered for you. Again, if you have specific questions about your resume, I highly recommend shooting over your resume through the resume review service, and also joining us next month when Julie hosts our Resumes 101 webinar. And once again, the requirements for CEUs is on this slide. Thank you so much, Julie, as always, for your insights, and thank you all for attending today. Have a great rest of your day, and we will hopefully see you soon.
Thanks. Nice to see you, Nicole.
You too. Bye, Julie.
Bye.